Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butts, get big or get out.
You know, it's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. And realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next Farm Bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.
You know, that's where like, a lot of people mix it up, but actually majority of coffee is coming from Ethiopia. It comes from Kenya. One of the most expensive coffees in Africa, even in the world, actually, is also Kenyan coffee. There's delicious coffee coming from Kenya, from Ethiopia, Congo, Tanzania, Burundi. And in Africa alone, there's 20 countries producing coffee.
20
countries. But I think, you know, this is actually, I can take the whole day talking about this, but I'm sure people won't be interested in. But honestly, like when it comes to like even cacao from Kenya, there's so many different countries. The problem is, I think what we need to do, it has to kick off from the government perspective as well. Like we need to ensure that we're coming together. Because if you can come together, and I was speaking to somebody about this recently, you can actually ensure competitive pricing.
Hey everyone, you're listening to Item 13, a bi-weekly podcast covering everything African food, and I'm your host, Yom Tego. Every other week, we'll delve into the world of African food, chefs, curators, and bloggers. I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, this is the last interview of Season 2, and we're rounding off the season by talking about one of my favorite vices, coffee, with Amani Kiflemariam, who is founder of Amatte Coffee. Amani was born in Eritrea and grew up in the Sudan in the UK, with a deep appreciation for the social and economic significance of coffee within Habesha culture. Amani worked in finance in London before putting her talent into building Amatte, that not only promotes African heritage, but also benefits those small lot farmers who nurture this precious crop. Amani combines her passion for fine coffee and gender parity into Amatte, which offers high-end coffee cultivated by hard-working female farmers. Amatte's debut coffee collection comprises of 5 refined tastes that distill the continent's complex and inspiring spirit into every sip. Here's my fun conversation with Amani.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm a big coffee. I'm a coffee drinker. Let's just say I'm not gonna put myself out there as a coffee addict. So let's just say I drink coffee. So really excited to hear. You know, when I saw what you're doing, I was really excited to talk to you about it, and especially with my interest in the African food value chain, I thought this would be interesting for people to know about. So why don't we start first about you telling us about a little bit about yourself. So who's Amani? Where did you grow up? A little bit about your Ethiopian and Eritrean heritage, maybe?
Absolutely. So I'm Amani Kiflemariam. I was born in Eritrea, East Africa. I lived in Sudan for about 8 years. My family had immigrated because of the war of Eritrea and Ethiopia. So they immigrated years back, but it just happened to be that they were in Eritrea when I was born. I grew up in London, so I grew up here for about 21 years now, actually. So my entire life, my education and everything is actually here in London. My background.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I did legal, and yeah, my career kicked off here in London, really.
Okay, and then when you and your family moved to London, what sort of ties did you still have to Eritrea, to Sudan, even?
Yeah, I think the culture was always, I think with East African parents, especially like Ethiopian Eritreans, the way we grew up is that your culture is that, even regardless of where you are,
Right.
Ethiopian Eritrean culture is, it's always part of the day-to-day, whether it's coffee, family, food, etc. So I did grow up I'm one of 5 children. I'm the youngest.
Nice.
Yeah, so there's always that connectivity, with Africa and our heritage and who we are, etc., so that we don't forget. It's very important for my mother,
Right.
a single mum, to actually ensure that we always know where we came from in terms of values and heritage, etc.
That's great. And so then I know you have a full-time job in like financial services, right?
Yes.
So then that's great, because I also work in financial services. So
Okay.
it's interesting. Like when I talk, I actually find that a lot of people, I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but a lot of people I interview will have some sort of financial services background, and I'm jumping into food or food related something. So you do this full time. It's a demanding job actually. And so how did you decide that you wanted to end up in coffee specifically, and then how do you juggle your full-time job, versus this coffee interest?
It's a really good question. I actually get this question asked all the time. I work for an investment bank. It is quite demanding, the hours, etc. About 3 years ago, I really asked, I think, a question that many of us ask ourselves, like, what is my purpose? How much value am I adding? Obviously, financial services, you can say you're adding value because you're helping businesses and individuals in terms of entrepreneurship. And the bank that I work for is very big on entrepreneurship and helping entrepreneurs. So, but I asked this question. I've always had an interest in Africa. It's very important to me. I think, Africa is such a rich continent. There's so much, there's a wealth, so much wealth there that we, as Africans, obviously we think about that. We think, what can we do, for the continent? And it was so important for me to get involved. But for me in particular, because coffee was founded in Ethiopia, and I grew up with coffee. So to give you an example, in our culture, anyone that comes to visit, the first thing you do is bring out the coffee ceremony, which could take up to 3 hours to, and it's just about connecting. So through the coffee, you are, talking about family stuff, about life, you just kind of really connect. Right. You're building relationships with the coffee ceremony. And this is why it takes 3 hours, and there's 3 different stages to it. So I always grew up with this passion, but I knew that I wanted to do something, and I wanted to do something for women. And the reason for that is because I grew up with a single mum. Okay. Single parent household. We came to the UK. It's pretty much for a better life, and as refugees, as unfortunately that's basically in that part of the world. So I always had this drive in me that if I'm going to come here, I'm coming here for a reason. And that was to give back, especially in terms of coffee and the women. The women, 80% of the work on the ground when it comes to coffee farms. Yeah. This is not just in Africa; it's across the world. Is done by women. But when it comes to management positions, ownership of land, etc., it's only 15%, and that's even it's approximately 15%. So I went to travel. I went back home, and I felt there is so much that I can do, because I'm always being the person that not just wants to stay, the life, because when you work in finance, it's easy to get stuck in that life, where everything, yes, you're working hard, but everything. It's just a different life. And then when you go back to the village, you go back to visit, parts of, when I go to Eritrea and Ethiopia, I don't stay in the capital, Asmara or Addis Ababa. It's nice to kind of obviously connect friends, but I've always had an interest in going to villages and just really connecting with those, people from that part of the world. So that's what, to kind of sum up, I just wanted to work with people. It's not even about giving back. I'm not talking about charity. Yeah. Because I actually support orphanages separately. Oh. But that's not sustainable. Right. You give away, it's just not sustainable. But if you can teach people how to actually, create something that's revenue generating for them, pay them the right, fair trade, by direct trade. I'll talk about our business model later.
Right.
You can ensure that these women are getting what they're getting, what they should be getting in terms of the coffee. You can help them to ensure the coffee is of good quality. And also in terms of education for themselves, hygiene, all of this stuff. There's a lot of stuff that we need to work with and Leah Kabeder has a foundation that is kind of focusing on mothers, etc. So for us, it's something similar, because we've created this foundation as well, where we take 5% of the sales that we make directly on that to ensure that there's impact. So it's always been about impact for the continent and women.
No, that's really fantastic, because like you say, there's a lot of people, and I don't even know if I don't want to say it's our generation specifically, but from the anecdotes or, from what I see and read, it sounds like particularly our generation, and maybe there's a certain sense of, okay, we've gotten to the point where we are able to maybe achieve a little bit more than our parents have. And so it's like, okay, like I've gotten to X point, now what's the next thing? How can I either give back or make an impact? And a lot of people talk and think about it, but I don't think that as many people actually do that hard work of taking the next step to do something. And, it's to me, it's like inspiring to hear you not just going back home to Addis, but actually going into the areas where you're meeting these women, actually doing the work. I find that really, really admirable. So I really wanted to start with the name of your brand first, and then we'll dive deep into. So for people that are not familiar with Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Habesha culture, let's start with that. So what does first Amatte mean? And then let's talk a little bit, I think you alluded to it a little bit, but about the coffee drinking culture versus, let's say, Italians drinking espresso, etc. So you talked about a ceremony, 3 stages.
Exactly.
Delve into that first.
Absolutely. So the name Amatte is actually my grandmother's name. So So I mentioned earlier that I grew up with very strong women in my family, like from my grandmother, my mother. As my mom's raising 5 kids on her own, you need a lot of strength and commitment and hard work to actually be able to do that. So my growing up seeing both these incredibly strong women. My mother was the breadwinner, and my grandmother was more like, helping out in the house and making sure that we were raised 5 kids. She did this for. So when my grandmother passed away, it was like, it's something that if you're connected to somebody so much, and my grandmother was my everything, it made me question life. This is probably not a business. I haven't actually opened. I don't really talk about stuff like this, to be honest, when I've been on panels and stuff, because, that was the drive. And I always thought, you question yourself, and anyone that's lost anyone important to them understands that you lose yourself. You think, what am I doing? Who am I? You're kind of asking all these questions. And I wanted to make sure, because of her values and the values that she had instilled in me, that her name was always remembered. And so I thought, with the coffee and her, or the values, what we're trying to do with the women, all of it just made sense. And also the meaning of the actual name means to lead by example.
Oh wow!
So it just fits. It just connected. So that's why we chose the name, to lead by example.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I'm sure she'd be so proud. So and it's a great connection, right? The name, what she lived and stood for, what the actual name means, and then what it is that you're doing with the farmers and the foundation. It all ties in quite nicely, I think.
Yeah.
So coffee drinking culture. So between Italians and their espresso, and what Starbucks is doing with trying to create a third, what do they call it, a third city or a third room? I'm interested in learning about your coffee drinking culture, and then how you're thinking about propagating that, I guess, with your coffee brand. And so, because I'm not sure that as many people are as familiar with that culture. I think when people think coffee, they think either Starbucks or Europeans drinking coffee on sidewalks in the summer or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I should start from saying, when you see Italian coffee, actually the coffee is African. And this is a debate that I have with my Italian friends and my European friends. Okay, actually, the actual beans is African or South American. So this is what we're trying to do with the brand Amatte, is to tell that exact story, right? The brand is called Amatte, but the coffee is really about these women. right? So we're trying to ensure that there is that transparency. If it's Ethiopian, Kenyan, Congolese, like, the coffee actually comes from this farm, from this woman, and this is what we're doing with the coffee. So that's the kind of transparency we want to create with the brand. In terms of Ethiopian coffee culture, so I should say, just kind of to clarify, Amatte coffee is not just Ethiopian coffee. First of all, it's the brand is empowering women, but we are specifically kicking off with Africa, and that's because obviously I'm African, and I'm proud to be African, and I have that connection with the continent. So what we want to do is tell the rich story of Africa through our coffee collection. So we have the first collection we've launched is called the African Royal Collection. So we've released 3. So the Emperor's Blend for Haile Selassie, Queen Sheba for the north of Ethiopia, and then Queen Nefertiti for Egypt. And then we're going to be releasing bit by bit, kind of going across other parts of Africa. But the actual coffee is all over Africa, just to clarify.
Okay.
But the Ethiopian coffee culture is very rich. And traditionally it's prepared and it's drunk twice or 3 times a day back home. And imagine, so if it takes 3 hours and you're doing this, pretty much that's what you usually get, a young girl in the house that would make the coffee. And growing up, I would do this for my grandmother.
Okay.
And that's when your grandmother tells you stories, your heritage, all of this. That's what that's our culture in terms of what we do with the coffee. But it's the 3 stages. So they make the coffee. They have these little cups, coffee cups to make the coffee. They have this clay pot where the coffee is made. They roast the coffee. So you start off with the green coffee. The green coffee is washed. It's roasted in front of everybody.
Oh.
That is there. Yeah, and then they grind the coffee whilst you're there. And there isn't a traditional way. There's no grinder. They use this special equipment that actually grinds the coffee there, and then the coffee is put into the pot. Water's put there, and then you'll wait until you can see it, you can hear it, that it's actually kind of cooking. So that's the tradition. But there's 3 different, the first, second, and third stages to the coffee, and that is really related to just how when coffee was discovered. It was discovered by monks. It was discovered obviously by the Chaldi. There's a legend that Chaldi, the guy who the shepherd, founded it because his goats started eating this plant, and then they started going weird and stuff. So that is
I've not heard that story before.
yeah, but really it's the monks that started drinking it to stay awake to pray. That's the history. Yeah. And it was actually a long time before they discovered that you can actually roast this, and then it helps you to stay the caffeine. So, but yeah, it's 3 stages in not just Ethiopia, also the Eritrean culture.
Okay. No, that sounds really cool and interesting. 3 hours though. That's, I guess if you are going to roast it and grind it and it would take that long. And I can also see how then community or connection kind of forms around that process just by virtue of the tradition and the process. One of the questions I had for you, and you alluded to it a little bit, I wanted to talk about the product range. So you said you have 3 lines. Are those ground beans or whole beans? How are you, in what form are you selling the coffee at this stage?
So we've got the so there's 5 coffees we've launched with.
Okay.
We've got 3 of them as part of the Royal Collection, African Royal Collection. Then we've got another 2, which is the 90 plus, which is 90 plus is not even 1% of the coffee in the world is 90 plus, which is basically the way coffee is cut. It's similar to wine, from 0 to 100.
Okay.
They taste it and then they give it a score. So 90 plus is very rare. So we've got that, and then we've got the connoisseurs blend. But all the coffees come in ground and they come in beans. Okay. So it just depends on what the client wants when they go to the
Okay. So is that then what makes it luxury? I was going to ask you about luxury or gourmet coffee. So is that then what makes it a high-end coffee, that 0 to 100 range you were talking about?
Exactly. So we actually cupped so the cupping process is where you get the coffee, you roast it, and then you grind it, then you put it into these different cups, you're tasting it, and you kind of assess it for its all the different criteria. Yeah. But within that, then you give it a score from 0 to 100. Okay. So all of these coffees, we went through 150 to find these 5 collections and 5 items within the collections to get everything that was 87 plus. So it's very high end coffee. That's good. So we've got 90 plus and like 89, 91, etc.
Nice. Okay, I think this is a good time to take a quick break. Then when we come back, we'll delve into your business model. We'll talk about the business of coffee, like how you're sourcing, packaging, that sustainable, the idea of sustainable coffee. We'll talk about, the work with the foundation and supporting female farmers. And then we can wrap up with, what's next for Amatte Coffee, where we can buy it now if we want to, and all that good stuff. So we'll take a break now, and when we come back, we'll delve into that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we're back from the break. Although I feel like we did cover a lot of what we want to talk about. We kept yapping away, but that's fine. Okay. So back, and we now want to talk about the business of coffee and entrepreneurship from the African's perspective. How we need to do a better job of like selling our continent's resources, adding value, understanding that value chain, and then being able to market it, upsell it to the global marketplace. So the business of coffee, first, so you decide you want to go into coffee because there's this culture, there's a story, there's this family connection. So where do you start?
Good question. So I when I decided this is what I wanted to do, I started doing loads of research, a lot of research. Yeah. And what I started doing, I went back home, I went to Ethiopia, I went to Eritrea, I started visiting the farms, I started going to entrepreneurial events. I've met a number of different successful entrepreneurs, managed to get, to kind of connect, to find, because there's so many events, but it's about selecting which is the best event to go to, right? So from the research, market research, coffee, commodity-wise, after oil, coffee is a second, right? Oh. It's like generating 100 billion USD every year, just after oil. So it's a huge industry, and it's a very easy industry to get into and also to exit. And because of that, it's very difficult, right? It's very difficult to be the best at what you do, or to have a USP. So the question is, what is your unique selling point? Exactly. What do you bring to the table versus the guy in the corner shop? Yeah. So that's what, I spent a lot of time focusing on that. Why us? That question that you ask, and you put that question to your friends, your family, to colleagues. Why? You're kind of bouncing ideas, and then you get to a stage where you're like, actually, I know why people should buy from Amatte Coffee. And these are the reasons, but it takes time to get to that stage because you're kind of brainstorming, then you think it doesn't make sense, and you're kind of like, but I think the first thing to do, really, what we did was, it was the research. Does this make financial sense? Right. In terms of the direct trade, does it make financial sense? How much are people paying right now? What are we trying to do? What is our USP? And that was, we thought, actually, we're all about delicious high-end coffee and women. Yeah. And this is how we're going to position ourselves in the market. Direct trade, empowering female farmers. But we're going to kick off with Africa. And there is a reason for that, because as an African, as I mentioned earlier, I want to ensure that we're telling the rich story of the African continent. So that's what we ended up with after a number of years of just really kind of, even the logo was changed a number of times. And I could talk about the logo, obviously the name, which is my grandmother's, but there's a logo on top, and that's all about feminism. Like, it's about female. You see, if you look at the logo itself, it's trying to connect to that, what we're trying to do, the work that we're doing with the women, female farmers.
Oh yeah, I'm just looking at it now and I see it. It's actually very interesting as I see the farm. Yeah.
It's not as obvious, is it?
No, but that's good. I think it's a subtle, and like when you said it, like it just popped. Like I could see it right away. No, that's good. Because I was just thinking as you were talking about it, how I was at a dinner party a few months ago where we were talking about coffee, because I'm a big, like I think I mentioned earlier, I'm a coffee addict essentially. And there was someone at this coffee table that we were arguing about where Starbucks gets its coffee from. And she was saying India produces most of the world's coffee and that all of Starbucks coffee comes from India. And I was like, I mean, I don't know. I drink a lot of coffee and I don't know much about, the sources and all of that stuff behind it, but I'm pretty sure that like some of that stuff comes from Africa. And she's like, no, it's all Indian coffee. I was like, I just didn't have the data information to back it up, but it just struck me how people don't know that one, we produce coffee, and two, that it's available like in your, I don't even want to say go to your local Starbucks, but it's available mainstream is what I want to say. It's just, it's not branded that way, right? Even you telling me that Italian coffee is, quote unquote, Italian coffee is made from African coffee beans, it's like, just people don't know that.
And I think going to that, first of all, Starbucks doesn't buy the coffee just from India. And I know this because I know the people who sell to Starbucks. Part of my research, and actually they happen to be close family friends. That's incorrect. And also Starbucks wouldn't be branding their coffee as from Ethiopia if it wasn't coming from Ethiopia. Right. Obviously from a legal point of view as well. Right. In terms of when people say it's Italian coffee or French coffee, I think, a lot of people, when people say that, they think it's the coffee beans. Actually, it's the way you roast the coffee, or it's the way that you brew the coffee, right? Because you can get your own personality into the coffee. You might want it, medium roast, actually dark roast for espresso. It really depends about what you want to do in terms of the coffee. If the coffee is very high and expensive, you don't want to roast it like a dark roast. You wouldn't want that, because actually you're just wasting the coffee. You want to taste, whether it's the berries or, whatever the notes of the coffee, you want to be able to taste that. So you want to do a medium roast and then filter coffee, like you want to be able to enjoy it. So it really depends on how you want to have the profile of the coffee, but the actual beans, that's where like a lot of people mix it up. But actually majority of coffee is coming from Ethiopia. It comes from Kenya. One of the most expensive coffees in Africa, even in the world, actually, is also Kenyan coffee. There's delicious coffee coming from Kenya, from Ethiopia, Congo, Tanzania, Burundi. And in Africa alone, there's 20 countries producing coffee.
20?
20 countries.
Wow, I did not know that. I actually thought it was just a few, like in sort of in the Horn of Africa, like Eastern Africa, the Horn of Africa, that section. I didn't know it was that many also.
Yeah,
and that is just so, and it's one of the things that frustrates me, and I don't even know like where the frustration starts and ends. Starting with like leadership on the continent itself, taking advantage of the resources we have, and thinking about how we can be better placed, on the global stage to take advantage of all of this, whether it's coffee, whether it's tea. I'm just going on a tangent, but that's just one of the things that like gets me, because you think of a small country, and I feel like I've had this conversation, I don't know if it was on the podcast or with somebody, but a small country like Italy that has its food culture just everywhere, mm-hmm. and you think a whole continent of Africa with all sorts of potential possibilities. Why? Anyway,
But I think this is actually, I can take the whole day talking about this, but I'm sure people won't be interested in. But honestly, like when it comes to like even cacao from Kenya, there's so many different countries. The problem is, I think what we need to do, it has to kick off from the government perspective as well. Like we need to ensure that we're coming together, because if you can come together, and I was speaking to somebody about this recently, you can actually ensure competitive pricing. Right?
Exactly.
You also need to take a stake in the companies that are selling this. So if you get together, you get a consistent pricing coming out from these different African countries, you can invest that money to actually buy shares within, whether it's Cadbury or all these different, we're just talking about chocolate here. But I think that's how we need to start thinking when we're thinking about, it's not just, hand over, here's whether it's the cacao, there you go, do whatever you want with it. Actually, think about the end result, because that's where you make money and profit, and you want a stake in that. So
yeah, I don't know. Like you said, if I start going down that road, we could talk about that all day. It's just like super frustrating to me. Anyway, so back to your business model then. So you're getting coffee directly from the farmers, and let's talk about your foundation also. So how does that all work in terms of sourcing and then the foundation piece?
Sure. So we work closely with partners of ours called Addis Exporters. Okay. Incredible. So they sell to like global companies. Okay. They're huge. They're like number one, in across Africa. So we work closely with them to have that relationship. So they manage our relationship on the ground with farmers. And they work with another partner where on a day-to-day basis, because obviously we're based in the UK at the moment, and they go to all the different farms and have those conversations, and then that's how we manage it currently, because we don't have our own farm. Eventually that's what we want to do. We want to have our own farm and run it that way. Yeah, but at the moment it's the model is that we'd go directly to the farmers, but the relationship is being managed by different people on the ground. And then your other point, which was
no, that's okay. So in terms of the foundation itself and like empowering the female farmers, right? So what specifically are you doing around that?
Sure. So we're setting up the foundation. The reason we set it up is because when I was traveling across the different farms, I basically realized that there's a much more help needed versus just giving salaries. There's more, like, for example, the schools. It takes 10 kilometers for a lot of people to get to the school. Yeah. There is a school, but there aren't enough teachers. There's no enough chairs. There's no computers. So we donated 10 computers. With Addis Exporter, but we realized this is not sustainable. What can we do? So we want to partner. First of all, we within Ethiopia, what we do with the foundation, because we're going to be taking 5%, and we just launched. What we did in the last 3 years was we would just paying them directly. So we would give like donations, computers, financial like support. Yeah. Clothing, etc., to different schools, to also 2 orphanages that we support. One in Addis Ababa called Amatte, which is incredible, being run by nuns. Okay. And then there is another one in Asmar called the Samaritan Sisters. But that's what we're trying to do with the foundation. But in terms of the women, what we want to do is what we've been doing rather is we have been supporting an organisation, the Samaritan Sisters, in where they go to villages called Tigrigna within Eritrea. To give an example, they teach women how to make like all these different scarves, like dresses, all of this. So they teach them how to do that. These are usually single mothers. Mm-hmm. And then when they come to do that, they also take the children to the nursery. So these women, they don't have to pay for any of that. They give them, and they teach them. So we're supporting basically these women. In addition to that, obviously, when it comes to the farmers, we're just basically, whether it's education, how to manage your finances, education on how to actually ensure that your children are, getting the best education they can. So simple things like there's, like when we gave the 10 computers, we basically partnered with a local organization where these women can now actually take these children to also give them access to those PCs, because we're talking about villages here. Yeah. So it's tough. This is if you get electricity. But the foundation is basically looking for ways, to create impact.
No, I think that's fantastic. And I'm sorry, like it sounds like I'm like really quiet. I'm just taking it all in because I'm also like incredibly impressed by how much you're doing, and knowing also that you have, a full-time job and that you've been very thoughtful about the entire chain, right? Not just, I'm going to do premium coffee and make money, but that impact, direct impact, I guess, to the farmers, especially the female farmers, I think is laudable. So I'm just like taking it all, and I'm like, this is all really fantastic. It's one of those things where I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? my life.
No, you're doing loads of stuff.
No, it's really fantastic, and it's great to hear. And I mean, obviously, you can tell. I think that we both have sort of similar sentiments about how much more can be done in like the African food and beverage space, if you want to call it that, and how much value can be added and impact that needs to happen there. So I'm truly really stoked about this and excited for what's to come with you guys. So you just actually, we were talking about this earlier, you just officially launched in London. You had a launch party.
Yes,
last week.
did.
How did that go? What was the response like? What was that like?
So it was actually Thursday, 2 days ago, and we spent about a month running around with my team. So I'm very lucky to have a talented team. We've got a sales director and one communication director and 2 analysts at this stage. So obviously we just kicked off now really officially. So the event was very much to really bring our investors, our clients. We've got a few key clients, our friends, and a few family members and a few friends to actually just say thank you very much. We're here. We showcased the collection. Mm-hmm. We had espresso martinis, which were delicious. Yeah, of course. And people really tasted the coffee. We wanted feedback. So we had a feedback bowl just for people to just say, what did you think? What can we do better? How can we? And so it was that. It took place in a place called Aquavit. Actually, I think you guys have an Aquavit in New York City, which is by Marcus Samuelson, right?
Yeah.
I think he owns it. Yeah. So we did it there in London, and it was such a lovely, lovely, lovely event. Because when you're working on something for like 3 years and you suddenly see it all coming together, like, oh my God, this is really happening.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, like, that's probably the point where you're like, holy crap, this is it. This is that's great. So then, like, you're officially launched. Like, what for you up until this point has been like the most surprising thing maybe on this journey? Like you obviously did a lot of research, you've understood sort of what you're trying to bring to the table, but have there been any things that have really like truly surprised you along the way? Would you do anything differently up until this point?
I think yes, I would do a few things certainly. For example, when we first started 3 years back, like kind of getting the website or kind of instructing someone to create a website where you have no proof of concept, you don't have a business plan, you're rushing to get things that you think you need in place when actually they're not the important thing. The most important thing is the business plan. Yeah. What are you trying to accomplish? What are the projections looking like? Who are your investors? Do you want investors? Where is your place in the market, etc.? That's the most important thing. And then once you've got that, you want to create the brand, you want to test the brand, you want to get feedback to create the best you can. So that's the way it should have been done. I would say I went the wrong way about it initially in terms of just, you spend a lot of money because you think, you just want to make it happen and you think it's going to happen within a year. You're so passionate, you have so much energy. You think, honestly, if it was up to me, it would have launched 2 years ago.
That's actually a good point from a couple of different perspectives. One, where a lot of I've heard people say, because I'm thinking about a couple of different entrepreneurial opportunities right now, and a lot of the advice I've been getting is one, like, don't overthink it, just do it. Like, it's that first step that will help you learn what you don't know and what you do know, and you sort of self-correct as you go along, because you could spend 5 years like thinking about it and not actually doing anything. And then that idea of spending money where it's not necessarily needed or impactful quite yet. Like, I think there's that rush and that, like, I want to make it look beautiful, and before you actually understand who your target market is and all of that stuff. So
exactly. Yeah. But I think, and I've been very lucky. I've had some incredibly like amazing women in my life, but I'm talking about from the business side of entrepreneurs. Like, 2 of my friends who, like, they did all of that, like kind of apprentice or Dragon's Den. They succeeded in the business. They're across the different markets and stuff. So being able to have somebody to bounce ideas with, because it's not easy. It's, for me, I started this on my own. It's a lonely journey.
Yeah,
it can be very lonely. You feel like my salary is going into this every month. My lifestyle has to change.
Yeah, I totally relate. And you're right. Like, I think I have like a core group of girlfriends right now who I'm bouncing stuff off and who are actually helping me do the work, some of the work around. I think we talked about this offline, like around, creating a certain type of experience, branding, and just having that is just priceless, I think.
For sure. And not spend too much money as well. And also, actually, another tip, or kind of something to share. When you first start and you're telling people about the idea, and people are so excited. Some people come to you and say, "I want to invest." You get so many people that want to invest. And I think from my background is legal, and I work in risk and strategy. From that mindset, you always, from KY, knowing your client, all these risk assessment checks that we do in the bank. And you want to start checking, who is this person? You're telling me you're this person, but actually, are you that person? So there is that additional due diligence, enhanced due diligence that you have to take, because you have to be very protective over your brand. You don't want to be associated, with the wrong people, for example.
Right.
As you're going to all these different events, you're meeting different people. It's just, a gentle reminder, is this person who they are, who they say they are. As simple as it is, it's just kind of protecting the brand in the long term. You don't want to be involved with the wrong people, etc. So that's something,
that's great. And it's funny that I feel like you were almost on the cusp of saying KYC, and I was like, no, I don't want to the bane of my existence.
I'm sorry.
No, but it's funny. And I actually, to be honest, I never thought about that application, right? Of, like what we do in our day jobs and how that potentially translate to entrepreneurial. I need to do that, due diligence and knowing who that's right. Like, even understanding like what, if you're on the same page in terms of values also, which I think people I don't know if the right word is underestimate, but it's just like, oh, someone's ready to give you money, but are you guys on the same page in terms of value driven, right? Not necessarily just, he agrees with the business plan, but like the underlying core values, are those similar? Because, if it ends up becoming more profit oriented versus, what you're trying to do from a value perspective, that could also cause issues down the road, I suppose. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so this is all great. I'm really so excited. This is one of those things that I'm just really excited for. Like, one, because I'm a coffee lover personally, but then two, just like this, it's just a great model. I've seen the branding and all of that looks good, and the impact that you're trying to make also, like the entire package for me it's heartwarming, and I'm excited about it for you and for the team. So what's next for you guys? So, you've launched, you have a limited product line right now, plans to go international coffee shops maybe? I know you talked about a farm also.
Yeah, for sure. So at the moment, we've basically client acquisition. So we're talking to clients and stuff, because those 5 coffees are for B2C.
Okay.
It's just for people that want to go and buy, they want to try the coffee. But we have a wholesale business within Amatte.
Okay.
This is where we're talking to all these different kind of Michelin star restaurants, etc. So we want to focus on that as well. But at the end of the year, we are also planning to open a coffee shop, so a boutique coffee shop somewhere central. This is where the investors come in. The investors after the due diligence, by the way. Those investors that have been incredibly supportive for the last 2 years and just waiting until we were ready. And we want to open a coffee shop because I think it's very important that we connect with our consumers somewhere central and give them that experience of the delicious coffees that these incredible women are making.
Yeah, I'm excited. Next time I'm in London, I think I'm in
Yay!
London this fall. I don't know if that will be when it'll be open, but yeah, I'm excited. Like one of the dreams I've had, which I don't know if ever happened, is actually to have like a fully African sourced like cafe. So like with like a very unique type experience. You have African coffee, chocolate, like everything is sourced from directly from somewhere in Africa. It's like one of the ideas I'm playing with in my head. So this is exciting for me. So before we transition to sort of the rapid fire questions, can you let people know where they can find you online if they want to buy coffee or follow your story?
Yeah, sure. So on Instagram we're Amatte, AMATTE coffee. And the website is www.amatte.co.uk.
Great. Okay, so rapid fire questions time. And like, I'm looking at some of the questions I have now, and I feel like the first question I know what the answer is because of what we talked about in the last hour or so. The first question is coffee or tea?
Coffee, of course. Any day, give me African coffee.
Yeah. Sweet or salty?
Sweet.
Morning person or night person?
A morning person. You'll find me at the gym at like some ridiculous hours if you're looking for me.
If you could live on one dish for the rest of your life, what would that be?
Jello fries. Jello.
No, you need
or my Nigerian.
Yes,
Jello. No, honestly, I thought this was Nigerian, but some friends of mine have been telling me no, it's Ghanaian, and then it's from Cameroon.
Jollof is the best, I would say.
We make it in the Arabic culture in the East African as well. And,
oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
We
know
also,
that.
it's very similar. They make it with like all these different meats and stuff. It's very nice.
You know, to be honest, I just anyway, like I feel like, well, first of all, jollof, I feel like you can find across different cultures, right? From like Spanish rice to paella, like different varieties or versions of it.
Yeah.
And
so is that Nigerian or where is it from?
Exactly, right?
You know?
Yes. And then the last question is, what your favorite African restaurant is anywhere in the world, and why?
I would go for Adelise in London. Adelise is an Eritrean restaurant.
Oh.
It's actually, I've been going to that restaurant for 21 years now with my family. So the food is very nice.
Okay.
It's a very clean, delicious,
I'll make a note to try that next time I'm in London. That sounds good.
I'll take you anytime. I'll take you.
This is great. I have had such a good time talking to you, Amani, and I think it's a good way to spread the word for all you coffee addicts out there. Even if you don't like coffee, you can buy it and send to someone like me who loves coffee. And I'm thrilled about your story, and I wish you guys nothing but the best of luck as you go.
Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you.
A quick one, guys. If you've loved the show of the last 2 seasons, I would really appreciate your feedback through ratings and recommendations on the podcast platforms where you listen to the show. Also, stay tuned for next week's wrap-up episode, where I think we'll make a couple of big announcements about what's going to be happening during the summer while we take a break from recording the show.